Hello, everybody. We are back with part two, this podcast with Michael Pinto of Wonder Makers Environmental. And we just had an amazing half hour with Michael, sharing a lot of his heart about why he does what he does and a little bit of his background. And everyone should be able to connect who is either in the industry or who is suffering health issues, or you're wondering about things in your home, with a lot of what Michael has already shared. And in this segment, I actually want to go a little bit deeper into uh, the technical connection I've got with Michael and a little bit of the technical side of what he does and really what's happening in the industry. And so to kind of set this up, there are two websites that every single one of our clients gets um, linked to in an initial email. There are several links that we provide in an initial email to our clients, and the first two links on there are the following. And you should write these down if you've got the ability to, or come back and re-listen to this. But the first one is wondermakersenvironmental.com, and the second one is moldsensitized.com. And the reason we forward those to people is because they are a baseline, I believe, the foundation of the best of what the indoor air quality and mold remediation industry would have to offer to anybody, whether they're a professional in the industry or they're a consumer. And these are the baseline points to start finding the information that you need if you're a client and you want to know more about your home, more about the environment that you're working in, or you want to know about the remediators that you're interviewing or the ones that are working in your home. These sites have a plethora of information for you that will not steer you wrong. It will keep you on the highway without running off into the ditch. And any of you who have been out surfing the web, trying to find information about mold, about indoor air quality issues, so many of you feel like you're probably a little rowboat on the ocean at the edge of a hurricane, or possibly in it, and that so many people disagree and you can't find a standard, so to speak, in the middle of any of it. And I will tell you from our experience as a family going through this firsthand in our home, these are the best places to start. This is the foundation for you to start. And so, Michael, you can talk a little bit more if you want to about your business, about Wonder Makers Environmental. And then I would also like you to talk a little bit about your involvement in the Restoration Industry Association. Short for that is the RIA. And it's the Restoration Industry Association that you have trained for, and you've written a lot of material for, that has trained up at this point at the CMP level, the highest level of training. I think there are 59 or 60 of us that have been trained to that level with you.
Correct. Yep.
Yeah. So why don't you go ahead and share a little bit about those things?
Well, I think again, it all loops back to the beginning. You know, I consider myself in my first professional designation as a certified safety professional. That comes from working with Michigan OSHA as well as the National Safety Council. That's where I got my start with that. Then started getting onto the health side of things, as we talked about in the last podcast, where asbestos exploded onto the scene in the mid to late 80s as a more significant contaminant. And so through that process of being there while those original regulations were being developed and being an advocate for some of those regulations because of my work at the Asbestos Victims of America, the AVA, and meeting a lot of really sick people at that point in time, sick in the physical illness sense,
Yes.
not sick in terms of their viewpoints or anything like that.
Right.
But just being able to experience that as a young man, have my own brief experience with some chemical exposures and things like that, bringing that all to a fore and realizing that, yeah, there are things out there that can impact our health that are beyond our control. I just happen to be in the wrong place at the wrong time for a meeting and have a issue. So there's things like that that make a difference. I mean, one of our famous cases, we actually won an award for it, was working with an airport control tower that had mold in it. And those poor controllers were just trying to do their job, people, and the plane's safe. And I fly an awful lot, so I'm appreciative of what the air traffic controllers do. But
Absolutely.
they couldn't just get up and walk away from their desk in the middle of landing a plane or helping a plane take off or something like that. And so when they were being exposed, first to the mold and then to the cleaning chemicals that were inappropriately used to clean the mold, because again, people like to do it on the fast and the cheap. And so they don't want to do the right cleaning. And so we're just going to spray it with something. And the spraying, of course, disperses the spores as well as the chemicals, and the combination of those. I mean, if I thought I had it bad, they had 9 or 11 people that went to the hospital, and quite a few of those were medically diagnosed as chemical burns to their lungs and stuff because somebody did a bad mold remediation job.
Yep.
And that's one of the reasons that in my textbook, one of the key statements I make is that bad remediation can be worse than no remediation at all. If you don't know
Exactly.
what you're doing, if you're trying to take a shortcut, if you fall for the, oh, we can just spray this stuff and it will take care of everything. It will explode the mold. It will destroy it. It will vaporize it. That's just not true, Dean. I mean, these things can be an adjunct and they can be very helpful if they're used in the right way. But to try and substitute chemistry for physical cleaning, whether it's asbestos. I mean, this is the thing that I've learned over 40 almost 45 years in the industry now. They tried the same things for asbestos. Well, we can just spray this stuff on and it will dissolve it. Well, no, it
Mm.
won't. Okay. And then they tried it for lead. Well, we can spray this stuff on and it will encapsulate it or it will do it. It's like, well, generally not. I mean, it might be a temporary fix until you can get to something better, but it's not going to be a permanent fix. And indoor air quality all the time. Well, we'll just open the windows, or we'll just clean the ducts. And I love duct cleaning. I love the duct cleaning professionals, and it's an important part of what we do. But just cleaning the ducts when you don't know what else is wrong with a building, or somehow that's going to be the answer to whatever all your problems are, it generally isn't the case. And
Yeah.
you yeah, and the worst ones, of course, is when they just spray something in the ducts. I've had
Absolutely.
that happen too many times too. So all of these things loop together. Um, I do think the industry has made great strides in understanding that if you take enough reasonable professionals who have experience in the industry and sit them down in a room with the right motivation, you can develop a guideline, or a voluntary standard, or whatever you want to call it, but something that contributes to what I call the standard of care. And that's why I'm involved in the Restoration Industry Association, currently serving on the board of directors there. That's why in the past I've served on the board of directors for the Indoor Air Quality Association. I've also served on the board for the Environmental Information Association. And I don't know if you heard this, Dean. I uh, a few months ago was actually elected. The Environmental Information Association elected me to their emeritus board.
That I
So
had not heard.
yeah, so I guess what that means is that I've been around long enough and I'm old enough that now I qualify as emeritus status.
Well, that's good.
Well, it's quite an honor. I've been involved with the EIA again for almost 35 years, sometimes more active than others. Uh, and they're my connection to essentially the beginnings of Wonder Makers. They're more focused on the asbestos and the lead side, although they're moving forward into other areas as well. Restoration Industry Association is going to be more on the fire and water loss and content cleaning, and the mold, some of the environmental things that go along with water loss. And the Indoor Air Quality Association is a interesting group. They tend to focus on um, a little bit more of the holistic indoor environment,
Yes.
the bow biology, as the
Yes.
Germans say,
Yes.
and so all of those areas. I mean, I try and stay active in all of those, but that takes time and energy, and it's voluntary. You know, I'm not making any money off of any of the time that I spend on those, but it's also, not only do I learn so much from the other professionals that are there. You call me one of your mentors, but I've got so many in the industry I've been blessed to know,
Yep.
and by volunteering and getting involved in those sorts of situations, you pick up things just from talking to people, just like these podcasts and stuff. You never know where the conversation's going to go, and you always end up better for it. Um,
Absolutely. So tell
and
us a
then
little bit about Wonder Makers.
what's that?
Tell us a little bit about Wonder Makers.
Well, an interesting story there. I was at the National Safety Council and then had an opportunity to run a local safety council back in my hometown of Kalamazoo. So I took that opportunity, did that for a few years, and was like a two-person show on the local safety council, and probably burned myself out, um, you know, faster than I should have.
Yeah.
Um, and ended up taking a position with a private consulting firm who was, trying to take advantage of the asbestos situation and needed a training provider. So I developed a number of training programs in the asbestos field. Have always been interested, even way back when I graduated from college and was with the uh, Michigan OSHA. They would need somebody to make a presentation. I'd be like raising my hand. I don't know anything about it, but I like making presentations and
Right.
I'll do stuff. So I've always been a teacher. Later on, became a preacher, and actually consider that to be a core for me. Is that I'm more of a teaching pastor when I pastor than I am anything else. So, God's given me these gifts to be able to explain these concepts to people in simple ways, and also to see a bigger picture, and then help figure out how that big picture focuses down to the needs of the individual. And I would say that is the core of Wonder Makers. We've always tried to see the big picture, whether it's a big picture related to asbestos or lead, indoor air quality, radon, um, certainly mold. Um, Became a de facto expert, as a matter of fact, in terms of oxidizers. Written probably more in the technical arena on hydroxyl radical generators and things like that. That isn't marketing information than probably anybody else that I know, and have
Yeah, I
become
would agree.
actually have become recognized as a expert in the legal field in these areas too. So,
Yes.
but that's what it's all about, seeing as how all this fits together, big picture, and then shoot it down for the individuals.
Yes. Okay. So I want to wrap a little bit of that together so that people understand Michael and Susan own a business called Wonder Makers Environmental. You can find them at wondermakersenvironmental.com. I would encourage you to go visit that website. There is a bunch of information that if you're like me, you can simply go through all the tabs, and just by reading the tabs of the website, you can learn so much about an industry or about a company. But then go deeper into the tabs and go into the information, and you're going to learn a lot about what Michael and Susan have created Wonder Makers to be and what they do. And then there's a lot of information there for you that they offer up, links to articles and links to other organizations. That's really important. And then Michael's involvement in the RIA, he has been instrumental in leading the best of best mold professionals. So the mold remediators, I come out of that realm, and voluntarily, involuntarily, again, you don't always plan for what you're going to become. And until you become, and sometimes it takes a little while after you become to understand why you did. And for 5 years now, since 2014, we at ProCare have been doing an amount of consultation and inspections. We were doing inspections when we were doing our restoration work earlier, but now this is actually all we do. We don't do remediation at this point. I have all the equipment, but I don't have a manager to run a division for that. And we really believe that our knowledge base is best served to reach out to people in more of the inspection consulting and now with the education piece. And
Well,
so,
Dean, I want to cut in there.
yeah,
That's very common in the industry. I mean, one of the things that I do is I interact, as we were talking about, with so many other professionals in the industry, and it's not unusual for contractors when they reach a certain stage. You have a lot of experience, you've just seen a lot of things, and you realize that there's some giving back that has to happen for the industry, and it's great to give back by running a great remediation project or by running a company that can run 10 great remediation projects all at the same time. But it's a little bit different, and people often are drawn to it to say, you know what, I need to mentor some people. My time here on this planet may not be, I'm probably I'm closer to the end than I am to the beginning in my life these days. And being able to share some of that information with people becomes more important. And doing it through the Restoration Industry Association or the Environmental Information Association or IQA or any of the other groups that are out there, ICRC, I've participated with them over the years quite a bit, helped develop some of their standards. But somewhere along the line, if you're not giving back, if all you're doing is trying to take from the industry, if all you're trying to do is take from life, you're not going to be very satisfied. That's not who we are as people. We're designed to learn and grow and give, and that's what we try and do. Now we have to do some of that as a business, either through ProCare or Wonder Makers. That's the system that we're in right now. But there's other areas of your life where you can give back on a voluntary basis. And dealing with some of these industry associations, they always need help. There's standards committees that are always working on different things in our industry. And I would just say, in terms of our training at Wonder Makers, even though we are linked to the Restoration Industry Association, we always try and teach the standard of care. We don't try and teach a particular document. And
yes,
nor do I try and teach my professional opinions. I'm not shy to offer opinions, and I think many of the opinions that I offer are good ones, but that's not how a class should be based. You shouldn't go into a class and just there's if you dig into it, professional opinion should be based on timeless principles. And I don't care what the class is. If you're teaching somebody how to shoot a basketball, or if you're teaching somebody to, clean up mold, or you're teaching somebody how to preach a sermon, there's going to be timeless principles that are going to make up a standard of care, and everybody has to find their own style within that.
mm,
But
yeah,
but if the instructor isn't guiding them toward those bigger principles, and all it is, hey, this is the way I do it, and you should model that, I think they end up getting a stilted view of whatever industry or subject that they're being taught.
agreed. And that actually leads perfectly to the book. And I'm not sure who all helped you with this, but I'm sure you wrote most of this. And this is the Restoration Industry Association manual, and it's called Fungal Contamination: A Comprehensive Guide for Remediation. And I've got the second edition, and so if we do video these, if we ever do release the video, this is what it looks like.
Little dog-eared there,
It's a
Dean.
little dog-eared. Yep.
Have you read yours?
Oh yeah, that's a good thing. And I want to read a couple of small excerpts. These are bullet points out of the first 3 pages of this manual. And I want people to let this sink in, how important these next 5 things I'm going to read to you, how important these are 5 years ago, now, and 5 years from now. These won't change. And if you're out there and you're searching for answers, or if you're arguing with a remediator or an inspector, or you're looking for one of those two, and you're trying to figure out how to navigate that, I want you to listen carefully to these 5 bullet points from the first 3 pages of this manual. By the way, this manual is for sale. You can buy this. This manual will teach you everything you need to know in writing of how to do remediation. You will miss the classroom instruction, which is a huge portion, but you will at least have a guidebook that will keep you on a good path to get your home or the building that you work in a better place and to get your health better. So let's
Uh,
go ahead.
before you do that, I do have to cut in and say, if it had everything that they needed to
I
know,
know.
I wouldn't be working on a third edition, okay?
I know. I know. Well
But
said.
it's got a lot. It's
It's
got a
got a
lot.
lot. It's got a lot more than anywhere else I've ever found. So here we
So
are. I'm on the introduction. This is called, this little segment at the top of the introduction, it's titled Learning Objectives. Number 1, be aware of the extreme positions adopted toward mold contamination, fungophobics, and mold minimizers. Okay? Everyone who's listening to this probably can relate to these things. There are extremes. Be aware of them and know that you should probably stay in the middle of the two extremes. Number 2, understand the philosophy that undergirds this text, protecting people that could be exposed to mold and structures that are impacted by it. Number 3, realize that each mold remediation project requires knowledge in a number of different areas. And Michael's already, talked to us today about the fact that each project can be different, and that's important for people to understand. And then on page 3, over on the side, there's a little box that says priorities for fungal contamination work. There are 3 of them. Protect yourself and the crew. This is for the remediator specifically. Then number 2 is protect the building occupants. And number 3 is protect the building and contents. And in class, I actually made a note. Michael also told us, keep your priorities straight. So that's pretty important. And then the final thing in the side note on page 3 is fix the source as well as the symptoms and remove both visible growth and airborne deposition. And I tell you, there are so many people who fail to abide by those simple things that I just read. And if the remediators, if the inspectors, and if the homeowners just could abide in those things, so many projects would go so much better.
well, and I think, Dean, the knowledge, particularly on the 3 priorities, when I tell people to keep their priorities straight, you also have to understand that the priorities are going to be slightly different for other people. The insurance adjuster, who sometimes gets made out to be the bad person and stuff in some of these situations, eh, they have a different priority. By law, they're required to, speak for the building and the contents because that's what's insured. You're basically going after these things under your homeowner's insurance or your building insurance, not necessarily under your health insurance. And so it's no wonder that we end up with these kind of clashing sorts of situations. Uh, so we do need to be respectful where other people are coming from. And a medical doctor, for example, their first priority in some respects has got to be the patient in front of them. And if the restoration contractor isn't there, he's dealing with the occupant of the home. That's going to be their first priority. So the priorities that are listed there in the order that they're listed, it's the book is written for the restoration professionals, but the person who's a do-it-yourselfer who may be reading it just for general knowledge or stuff, or medical professional. We've actually had a couple of medical people who have bought the book to, increase their understanding. Those priorities will change depending on who the people are.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I would encourage if there are homeowners or medical professionals and even people in our industry who are IICRC trained, obviously we would want them to go through the coursework because there's just so much that you gain from being in that classroom situation with this manual in front of you. But I would encourage people to buy this book. This book has great foundations in it, and for medical professionals, you will learn so much and you will understand so much about what remediation should be and could be. For the homeowner, I've actually had a homeowner who did a project himself. he bought the manual and he read through the manual twice. And then he did his project. He had me come. I spent 2 hours with him before he started the project. He said, "I just wanna make sure I got this right. What do you think about what we're gonna do?" I read through the book twice, and he had a friend who had volunteered his time, who happened to be an ER doctor who was off for a couple months, and so he had an ER doctor who helped him do his remediation,
Wow,
and they
that's
did a
pretty
great
cool.
job. So
Well,
go ahead.
sometimes, Dean, it's also, what is the motivation? I mean, if we're doing things for money and strictly for money, that's one thing. But if your motivation is to help people and to try and make them get better, whether you're a contractor or an inspector or a consultant, I mean, I've seen so many bad inspection reports from, people that are supposedly peers and things in the industry. And so often it just appears to me it's just slapdash. They don't care. It's boilerplate. They never even bothered to change the name of the client, halfway through the report and stuff. I know you've seen things like
Oh,
this too.
yes. Yes.
And and at some point you have to have some pride in your work if nothing else. And I know everybody gets busy, and I know I've sent letters out that I wish I could, recall, uh, like Harry Potter with the owl bringing it back or something. But own up to those mistakes, admit that they were an error, and then correct them and move forward. But I'm not a fan, or nor do I. Um, it's hard for me to abide sloppy work because we're not in an industry where you can get close and it's good enough. When you're dealing with people's health and the serious consequences of this, you have to do it right. You have to hopefully do it right the first time. And if you can't get it right the first time, then by gosh, you better learn from that mistake and get it right the second time. But these endless cycles where people keep coming back and having to re-clean and re-clean and re-clean, something's wrong there. That shouldn't happen. We've
Correct.
got the technology, we've got the understanding of the industry. Uh, we shouldn't be looping back around to do the same house 5 times.
Correct. Yes. So, as we wrap up today, could you share 1 or 2 key things that you think most clients would benefit by? What would be the 2 things from your heart that would most benefit somebody listening to the podcast today that might be wondering if they have a problem or maybe they're going through a problem in their home?
I think I'd like to do the second one first, if that's okay. If they know that they've got a problem, or they suspect that they've got a problem, and they think that it's related to their house or to their business, or some indoor air quality issue or mold issue or something like that, I would just say that the more I learn and the more I understand, the more I realize that there has to be an integration between the medical and the environmental.
Yes.
And quite honestly, this is hard for me, uh, for my ego to accept that we can do a 100% perfect job remediating a home, or uh, a business or an office or whatever it is, particularly on the mold side, and that may not be enough. They have to match that with good medical. Just like, and it's interesting because it's taking me back in my history, just like we learned early on, we can stop the asbestos exposure. Okay, we realize, oh, this is asbestos, this is bad. We're going to go in, we're going to remove it, we're going to encapsulate it, we're going to stop that exposure. But that exposure has already happened to those occupants. They're already carrying some burden of fiber in their lungs or in their body. And it's the same way with mold. So just because we take care of the environment doesn't mean that the people are going to get better on their own. They oftentimes are going to need medical intervention. So that's probably the biggest insight over the last 4 or 5 years that just keeps coming up in my mind. Other than that, what I would say is that um, you do have to be careful in the industry, particularly in the mold remediation industry. Uh, you know, People can talk a good game, but if they're not talking, as you said, some of these timeless principles, if they're not really focused on finding what the source of the water is, and then dealing with the mold, that's the consequence of that. If they're not interested or don't do an investigation that takes into account where the spores have spread, what we call condition two in the industry lingo, but basically cross contamination. Just about anybody in many of these cases can go in and see, hey, mold there on the wall.
Right.
Great. But and and too often I see people wasting time and wasting samples of that. It's visible, there's a water source, we're going to take it out. At that point, I don't care what it is. What I care is that we're going to take it out. What I care is, where have those spores gone?
Yes.
You know, the furniture next to it, the ductwork, the other areas of the house, the adjacent rooms. If it's in a bathroom, did it really get out of the bathroom, or can we just contain the bathroom, or do we need to clean more? And this unwillingness of many in the industry to look beyond the visible mold. Oh, look, I found this in the wall cavity, or I found this downstairs in the basement, so we're going to take care of that. And to not go any farther with that is disturbing to me, and is something that we think about all the time at Wonder Makers, is that it's more than just what we can see. What you can't see can hurt you.
Absolutely. We agree.
Well, that's good, because I taught you a lot of that stuff.
Well, there are so many things that you taught that resonate with our story. And had we followed what I knew in 2012 compared to what I knew by June of 2014, we would still be sick. And who knows? We had some very hard days with Lorna and with one of the daughters, and we almost lost them. And I don't know where we would be if we had not gotten to this point where we understood this knowledge and then put it into practice immediately in our business at that time, and then proved out exactly the things that you wrote, exactly the things that you taught. And then one of the things that has stuck with me is we cut a new edge every day. The standard of care should be the foundation from which we build, but we should never rest on that standard of care. We should always be looking for a better, more efficient, more safe way to do what we're doing. And so everything that you've said today has been so helpful. I'm not disappointed. I knew I wouldn't be. And I really want to do more of these, because you have so much that you could share that would benefit so many people, and so many people would be blessed beyond measure, whether they would realize it or not, to have that exposure and to have some of these things that we talk about. All of a sudden, they're going to have these aha moments that are going to be really instrumental in finding good air in their home or their workplace, and good healing.
Well, I'm committed to helping you make this podcast a success, and I would be thrilled to come back and talk about more general things, or specific topics as well. And as you've got as a taste now, anything from asbestos to
Yeah,
indoor air quality. And I'll just share this with you, Dean. You know this, but I want the listeners and the viewers to know this as well. I have a real problem with some of the things that are going on in the industry. In the political world, they call it fake news. In our industry, we call it MUS, M-U-S, made up stuff.
yes.
And I just want everybody on your podcast to know that when I speak from an authoritative standpoint, it's because it's based on the science, and the best science that I'm able to get my hands on at the time. Um, I make it very clear in my classes, and even when I write articles and things, when I offer a professional opinion. But that's an opinion is different than what the science is telling us. And we need to respect that science. We need to be good scientists as well as good investigators and good builders too. So,
That is a great way to wrap up. So, Michael Pinto, I so appreciate you being here today. I'm excited to hear from people. They're in their comments. I want all of you to comment, and I want you to tell us how you were blessed, in this podcast. And then also, why don't you follow up and in the comments, give us what your biggest questions are coming out of this, because we would love to specifically answer those questions for you as best we can, not being on site where you live, but there are a lot of things that we can get information to you that will help you and help you understand your situation. So, Michael, for now, we're going to close this thing down, but we will definitely come back because this was a lot of fun. Thank you very much.
It was a lot of fun. I'll second that. Thank you, Dean, for the opportunity to be here. What a blessing. Have a
All
blessed
right.
day.
All right. Everybody have a great day today.